Well, it's the off season, but if you're a college football or a Big 12 fan, you are itching for that time of year, and no one better to talk about it with us here at Heartland College Sports, covering the Big 12. I'm Pete Mundo. Then Tim Brando, Fox Sports, joining us here on the show, YouTube, podcast, radio. You guys know how to join us. We appreciate you being a part of it. Tim, let's get right to it. It's going to be a fun few weeks here for the Big 12. Texas and OU leave. The four new teams from the four corners, as they're dubbed, come in. Which one is Tim Brando most intrigued by joining this Big 12 conference?
I'm going to say it's a tie, all right? I probably because I love both Utah and Arizona. I think they're going to have really good years. I'll give a slight edge to Arizona because of the intrigue without Fish as head coach, okay? Because they made a change. He took the UW job. I think we know what Utah is all about and what their quarterback's now in his 9th year, I think. But they've been really good for a really long time. And I think Utah comes in thinking we can win it right away. And I think Arizona, even though they've got more questions because of Fish leaving, they've got a lot of talent coming in. And I think we will learn a lot, a heck of a lot about them in that first big Friday game that Fox has scheduled, ironically, on Friday the 13th of September when that package begins in Manhattan, Kansas. Because to me, with Texas and OU out, you look at K-State, you look at Oklahoma State, you look at maybe even TCU, because they could be viewing last year as an aberration, not the year before, all right? Those teams have to believe that they are in the upper tier of the league now. They have to believe that. And history would point to both Oklahoma State and Kansas State having a lot of success over a long span of time. Mm-hmm. Okay, Kleinman's done a great job since taking over for Snyder. And they've got a big-time quarterback coming in, so good that Will Howard vacated for Ohio State. And that's going to be fun to watch, with a ultra talented guy coming in with them and the personnel that they have returning. They don't beat themselves. And Gundy had one of the great turnarounds last year, what looked like a season gone south. And all of a sudden, boom, there they are again at the end of the year, a factor. And they've been so good for so long, I thought Oklahoma State fans were warranted when they said, we're sick and tired of hearing about Texas until Texas had that great year last season on their way out. Because if you look at the last 15 years, it was really Oklahoma and Oklahoma State that were carrying most of the water for the league. So with Oklahoma gone and Texas gone, I think it's understandable for them to believe in Stillwater, hey, we're the big dogs now. No more of this little brother stuff, So it's going to be top to bottom the best league in the country. But they need somebody to get some big wins in the non-conference early, because as competitive as it's going to be, Pete, you know what the narrative will be, particularly now because of the Big Ten and the SEC and all the power they have with the new deal and with the discrepancy in revenues for those two leagues versus everybody else, including the Big 12. The narrative will be, it's really competitive. Top to bottom, it might be the best league, or bottom to top, as I like to say. But is it good, really good, or is it just mediocre? That will be the narrative nationally if no one gets some impressive wins outside the conference. So that's how I see it this year. And I think that Friday the 13th game with K-State and Arizona is a very compelling game, and a great one for that Friday package to begin with that Fox has got, which I think is going to be ultra successful. And I know that the people at Fox are going to promote it heavily. And I think that, Mike Mulvihill, who's our metrics guy and our vice president in charge of research for all things television, has said that he's more excited about this than anything in college football that Fox has had. And he was the author of the Big Noon franchise. It was his idea, his concept. So the Friday night thing is going to be a big deal. It's going to be presented as a big deal on Big Fox. And the games themselves are, pretty good. Really good. And I think a lot of people felt, even at our place, that, maybe that schedule's not as great as we had hoped. There's no Michigan, there's no Ohio State. I think their hope was they could get those teams at least on the road, some in the Big Ten. That didn't happen in the first year, but there's still a lot of really good games, and some of them intersectional games. The Oregon-Purdue game, the Oregon-Michigan State game. I mentioned the Friday game that started on the 13th. You know, that package begins actually week 3 of the regular season, and it runs through the rest of the year. And the games are pretty compelling. I mean, they really are. So, and without all the competition, if you're a Big 12 team in particular, I think you want to be on Friday nights because you're going to have a lot more eyeballs on your games than when you're maybe playing on Saturday and you've got a great game, but it's going in that 3:30 window opposite, you know, a Big 10 game or opposite an SEC game on Big Fox and or NBC, CBS. The competition for the audience on Saturday now is so it's so clogged up. I mean, it's a glut of games. So the Friday games, I think, could really get a lot of attention, and that's what those teams in the Big 12 need. You know, minus the big markets, they need to get more eyeballs on their games, and I think Brett Yormark's excited about that too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the Friday night's a home run for the Big 12. Now, when I asked you the 2 new teams you're most excited for, the one, you said Arizona, Utah. I know Colorado fans and probably Deion Sanders is saying, hey, what about me, Tim Brando?
Yeah.
Where does Coach Prime factor in, or do you think it's a lot of smoke and mirrors and not a lot of meat?
No, I think the meat is there, but what they've got to do is overcome the lingering residue of what was a limp to the finish last year. You know, they were incredible coming out of the gate. They were the best story in college football the first month of the season. I mean, they were. Even when they lost, it was a compelling way to lose. So everybody was talking about them, and understandably so. But I caught them towards the end of the year when they went to Wazoo, and I want to say maybe that was a Friday night game. Now that I think about it, I think it was a Friday night game, and they had just been just absolutely excoriated by injury. I mean, they were just awful. They couldn't protect Shador for anything, and he was just sitting back there with a target on his jersey, not a number, a target, and he was. I feared for his short and long term, athletic future. It was so bad in that game, and so they got to. I know they feel like they've got better talent now, and that they've got more depth now, but can they stay healthy? You know, through the first month of the season. If they can, Pete, I mean, you can make a case that their frontline guys, you know, are good enough to maybe get them to a bowl game this year, to win maybe, 7, 8 games. And in a league that looks like it's ripe for the taking by anybody, maybe they can be a factor in the championship race at the end of the year. The schedule's not awful for them. It's not terrible for Colorado this year. I mean, it isn't. So, they're a factor. I just don't believe they come in with the same sort of ammunition and level of confidence that either teams like Utah or Arizona would have, coming in from what was the Pac-12. I would give those 2 teams a decided edge on Colorado.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, Tim Brando, it's better for the Big 12 this year to have a November filled with chaos where half the conference is in the race for the final month? Or would you rather see, if you're the Big 12 and Brett Yormark, that one standalone, standout team that maybe can win a college football playoff game or 2?
Well, you want one team to separate themselves. I really believe that because, as I said, on paper, no one really does.
Yeah.
It looks like an extremely balanced league. So if someone can catch fire, like a TCU a couple of years ago, with that discovery of Duggan, and all of a sudden he just becomes, this wonder kid that was shot out of a cannon. He was a veteran player, but no one expected him to be that guy. Mm-hmm. And look, Shador might be that guy. Maybe Colorado is that team. They have the wherewithal to be really, really good. But I think we can make the same case for so many other teams in that league. If they cannibalize one another, and you're talking about, the champion having maybe 3 losses, I guess the good news is you're going to get in. It's a
Yeah.
12-team playoff this year. So you're going to get in, but you don't want to get in with a team that you feel like is going to be a decided underdog in the quarterfinals. And that would be, I think, the case if the champion, were a 9-3 team. So I love the fact that it's really competitive. It's compelling for an announcer because we like to have games that in the fourth quarter are coming down to, the end, and you never know what might happen. I'll give you a great example. Last year, Spencer and I were doing the TCU Oklahoma game on the Friday after Thanksgiving. And, TCU had some injuries and they got whipped. They got thoroughly whipped in that game. The next night, we're going up to a snow globe game in Manhattan to do K-State and Iowa State and Farmageddon. And that night, Iowa State discovered a freshman running back that could take this league by storm. Okay. I mean, really could. And that's a team that I think might be a trump card team this year. Matt Campbell is a great coach, and I don't doubt for 1 second that what happened to them last year was an aberration, that he can bring them back. But again, we're talking about a team, let's face it, if you're Kansas State or you're Iowa State, hell, even if you're TCU, you've got to be 7-0 or 8-0 before you get noticed nationally. You really do. You're not a name brand. And in today's college football, you either need a hook, which Colorado has in Dion, or you need a name brand. And right now, with OU and Texas gone, that's who we're going to fight to see. Who of this group is going to become a name brand? And right now, to me, the teams that bring the most gravitas into the conference this year are the two teams out west, Arizona and Utah, because that one's coming off an unbelievable year, a great turnaround year, but they lost their coach and still have a lot of talent. I like the guy they hired. I do. And Utah's got one of the most successful coaches in America. And, like it or not, they may be boring and they may be in the mountain time zone, but Utah just kicks people's butts all the time.
Yeah.
Check their record. They do. You don't have that kind of success over that long a period of time without that being the case.
When you look at the coaching in this league, you mentioned Kyle Whittingham right there being one of the best in the country. Guys like Mike Gundy, Chris Kleiman, what Lance Leipold's done at Kansas. You mentioned Matt Campbell. I mean, I feel like these guys are all very underrated, Tim Brando, and they're guys who have done more with less than a lot of guys in the SEC and the Big Ten. How do you read the coaches we've got in this league?
Well, they'll all tell you that they are culture creators, okay? And they are. The programs in the Big 12 are, for the most part, made up of teams that thrive on 3-star players or 2 stars that are developed over time and become outstanding, okay? And that obviously is a fantastic image for coaches and coaching, okay? But again, the people writing the magazines and the people that are doing the game shows or studio shows for the games themselves, they want to talk about the glitz and glamour of, the big time players that are at the big time programs. And so that's the uphill battle that the Big 12 has in terms of its image and its brand outside its footprint.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really ashamed of myself for not mentioning Kansas as one of those teams, along with TCU, and because Lance Leipold, my God, that was the hardest job in America. Look what he's done.
Yeah.
And they're not just legit, but they're a contender now. I mean, a real contender. So, slap me upside the head, Coach, if you want. I should have mentioned Kansas in that group because I love what Lance has done. I like the staff. People down south. I was just down in Baton Rouge yesterday before I came back home to play a little golf and be with you this morning. And I was asked the question on a Baton Rouge radio station. The young man, Matt Mascona, had me on his show, and he was talking to me about the Big 12. And I mentioned all these things that I'm talking to you about. And the big question in the SEC is what's Kalen DeBoer really all about? He's recruiting an abnormal number of 3-stars to Alabama, and they're not accustomed to that. It's all, Nick didn't have many 3-stars at certain positions. He got the best of the best. And that's scaring the hell out of Alabama fans. But that's business as usual for Kalen DeBoer. And I used Lance Leipold as a great example. DeBoer, because of his success at Washington and playing for the national championship, if you look at his resume, it's most similar to whom? It's most similar to Lance Leipold. Played at a D3 level, coached at a D3 level, came up and coached at really lower levels. And what happened? He kept his staff together. His guys had been with him all those years together. And that's exactly what Lance has done. Kotelnicki, his offensive coordinator, has been with him. I think he's one of the best offensive coordinators in the country. Could have been the Broyles winner a year ago. They don't lose their quarterback. I think he might have been the Broyles winner, and Kansas would have probably lost 2 fewer games. But I mean, my God, that team is just that's a team that would capture America if they had another start like they did, a couple of years ago and got out to that 6-0 start. Now, yeah, they faded and they just got bowl eligible and they lost the bowl game to Arkansas in Memphis. But look at the carryover from it. They built on that last year. They did. They incremental success. This is not. He views it as a distance run. This is a marathon, not a sprint. Well, now he's reached a point where KU is, you got to factor them in the championship hunt. And if that happens to be the team, that would really capture the imagination of the country. Everybody would be, because KU has been so historically bad for such a long period of time. And I think everyone pretty much agrees for the last decade or more, it's been the worst Division I college football job in America. Mm-hmm. And Lance has changed that narrative, a lot. So I use the DeBoer comparison to Leipold. I think if you want to say who resembles in terms of constructing a winning program, who resembles Kalen DeBoer, it's definitely Lance Leipold.
That's good stuff. Everyone's looking to the ACC, Tim, and just saying, what's going on there? What's next? I mean, what does this future look like? We know Florida State and Clemson won out. What does that mean for the Big 12? Are there pieces to pick up? What is the thing? Because right now it's just smoke, it's conversation. What's the thing to watch, and how should the Big 12 fan be thinking about what's going on to the East?
Well, I would worry less about that and gear up a heck of a lot more on what Yormark is doing. And not get worried, okay, about some of those brash, experimental or exploratory ideas that you're hearing about in the media. They're scaring the hell out of people, okay? The naming rights of the league and private equity. And that's been in the news, right? Mm-hmm. I'm sure you've been talking about it.
Yep.
He's doing what he has to do to play catch up. It is clear. And you know what? Mike Oresco had a great line when he left as the commissioner of the American Athletic Conference. And let's face it, the Big 12 wouldn't be where it is today if it hadn't been smart enough, wise enough to go and get the best teams that Oresco had in the American and bring them into the Big 12. That's why you've got all the really good things that you've got. You absorbed the loss of 2 of the biggest brands in college football, and yet your schools are making more money per year in their new TV deal than they made when they had Oklahoma and Texas in the league. That's a hell of an accomplishment when you think about it. And Oresco's teams that made those runs, UCF, most recently, obviously Cincinnati, who cracked the code and got into the college football playoff with only 4 teams. I mean, the pedigree of the teams that have come into the league, and I'm going to tell you, Houston's not far away. Yeah, they had a bad year. Yeah, they made a coaching change, but they have the financial wherewithal to compete at a high level, and they are in a huge market, and the league needs Houston to be good. They need to rid themselves of that commuter school mentality that so many in the state of Texas had of them, and even they had of themselves, and they got a chance to do that. But what Mike said was that he really was disappointed that the 100 or so schools that were outside the Big Ten and the SEC didn't coalesce around one another more and say, you know what, we're not going to allow you to have this kind of financial windfall in the new CFP that puts you even in a better position than you were in before. We need this to be more equitable. He was disappointed in that, and you know what? He's right. Mike's a lawyer. In what he did with the AAC in terms of building it up when the Big East Catholic schools wanted to stay all basketball, he took those football programs, he formed a new league, he gave it a new brand, and what did they do? I mean, UCF goes out and does what it does. Houston had that year before, Tom's team, Herman's team got hurt, but everybody's made significant runs. I think that what Yormark is looking at, to the extent that my point about Mike Oresco is true, he's got to be, I think, the ringleader, because the Big 12, in my mind, has the better environments. It has college football-centric stadiums. They're just smaller than the SEC, but the fandom is unbelievable. The tailgating rivals the Southeastern Conference. I know. I've covered that league for 30 years before I got to Fox the last 10. I'm going into my 11th year. No, they don't have the big markets, but they got a lot of tradition and they got a whole lot of history. They've got to be the ringleaders of all the other conferences. And by that, I mean, they need to show the way to the Jim Phillipses of the world and to the other leagues in college football at the Division I level, that as we get closer to the new TV deal coming in and the new college football playoff starting, which is in 2 years, something can and should be done to bring that financial playing field a little closer together than where it currently is, because it's not in a good place right now. And that's why Brett is doing what he's doing. And I applaud him for it. The ACC's issues are, I mean, all you have to do is just open up the different statewide laws of each of those institutions, whether it's Virginia, North Carolina, Florida, and see where they are and go, okay, how are you going to pull this off? I think they're clinging. I think Jim Phillips and the ACC are clinging to the notion that this settlement that Charlie Baker feels that he's been able to pull off can galvanize in some measure, okay, the NIL and the transfer portal circumstances that the coaches are facing and need fixed. And this is the sell. The sell is this: the Republicans will take over the House and the Senate on November the 5th. That's the sell. Okay. Now we're talking Charlie Baker, who's the president of the NCAA, a Republican governor in a blue state of Massachusetts. And he's got the ears of these guys. Okay. I am not a fan of the neo-colonial outfit that is known as the NCAA. They would be gone in 2 years if they hadn't got this settlement. Okay. They would have been gone. Now, the leagues all acquiesced and said, you know what, we're good for our dollars. But so they decided, you know what, at least for the interim, for the next handful of years, they're going to listen to Baker. And Baker is going to be with, okay, a bunch of Republicans in the Senate and the House, but particularly the Senate. That's where the juice is. If the Senate can go Republican, and they've got control of both the House and Senate and the executive office, then maybe the NCAA can bail out the ACC to some extent, because that's what it's going to take for them. You've got some people in Tallahassee and some people in North Carolina and obviously at Clemson that are just unhappy, really, really unhappy. And the only way that they can be made to smile is by having something done which will enable the playing field to balance, and their main television partner, which, let's face it, is ESPN, to come forward and say, all right, we understand that we are we're your partners too. We're not just the partners of the SEC. We're your partners too. So we're going to work something out here, and let's have a kumbaya together. That's what it's going to take. And Phillips is going to need Sankey to play along, and he's going to need Tony Petitti to play along. Otherwise, if he doesn't, if I'm the Big 12 and this thing doesn't work out the way they want, and the NCAA doesn't get the Republicans in command of both the House and the Senate, and Biden is reelected, then we may be looking at some form of the Big 12 and the ACC finding a way to get together. if only for the ACC to be able to exist. Because if they can't come together and be stronger as one, then I think the ACC is far more vulnerable than the Big 12. I spent most of last year telling people in the Big 12, you're fine. You're going to be good. You're in far better shape than the ACC. And someone say, well, but financially the ACC, yeah, we get that, but they are vulnerable, and they've got people within their league that are unhappy, very unhappy, and looking to leave. So at least you're not fighting all the litigation in the Big 12 that the ACC is fighting on a daily basis.
That's so true. We'll leave you on this, Tim Brando. Do you have, I assume you got a semblance of a schedule here. Are you going to be doing that K-State Arizona game on 9/13, or what's the early season games for you?
Pete, I only have the ability to guess. And as you know, when you guess or you assume, in our business, bad things can happen. I tell people all the time, and it's true in our business, the only thing that never changes about sports television is change. Okay. So between now and our seminar, which is scheduled, I think, for July the 19th.
Okay.
I think you're going to hear about a lot of changes and or surprises. And, but I have a hunch, because as you know, last year we did, my crew did about 4 Friday games with Saturdays the next day. I mean, we did double dips on, I think, 4 different occasions. And I didn't mind it because you expect it on Black Friday of Thanksgiving. I mean, you expect that, working Friday and Saturday. That happens most years. And we're not the only team, but Eddie and Brock did, so did Gus and Joel. I believe this year we'll do less of that, but I do think that the Friday games are very much in perhaps my wheelhouse because of geography. I basically, if I don't live in SEC country, I certainly live in Big 12 country. I can drive to TCU. I can drive to Baylor. Heck, I've driven to Stillwater many times, and Norman when they were in the league. During COVID, I drove to Manhattan, Kansas, and Lawrence, Kansas. So
how about
that? Because I wanted to stay out of airplanes, to be honest with you. And it kept me going that COVID season. I did not miss a game, but I did get COVID right after the regular season ended. It cost me a little bit in basketball, but I've got a good hunch that my crew will be involved in a lot of the Fridays. But it's just a guess.
Yeah.
And I don't know that they're going to have a quote unquote regular team, announced team for all of the Friday games. I don't know that that'll be the case like they did with Big Noon. I don't know that they're going to do that per se, but if it turns out that I'm doing a lot of those Friday games, I won't have a problem with it at all, because like I said, we want really good games and eyeballs on those games. And I think once you get past, the third game on a network, any third game on a network, the games, the importance of those games can drop. Okay. And certain weeks where we have soft schedules, the Friday game might actually be the better game than maybe even the second game that Fox has on a Saturday. That can be the case. So it won't bother me a bit if they say, Tim, we want you in Manhattan, Kansas for Arizona on the 13th, because those are going to be 2 top 20 teams. Yeah, preseason, those are 2 top 20 teams, maybe even top 15. And as I said, I think it'll send a strong message about where the league is and where we can maybe place Arizona as a new team and Kansas State, as a sort of charter member, if you will, of the old Big 8 and the current Big 12.
Well, it's going to be here before we know it. He is Tim Brando, Fox Sports. Always great to have him on. I'm Pete Mundo. Of course, if you're on YouTube, hit that thumbs up. The podcast, the radio show, we appreciate you guys. And Tim, we're grateful for your time. We'll be watching this fall, and we'll be talking to you soon, my friend. Thanks so much for being here.
You got it, Pete. Many thanks, and anytime.